Here I'm back. We're going to go to our next guide. Um, let's talk about preparing your province. So this is going to go over builds and your military training. Two things. Okay. Your throne page kind of tells you everything that you have currently trained up. You know, that many weapons rolls over. The terminology is important here because every race is going to have different names for their specialists and their elites. So for orcs, elites are ogres, defensive specialists are trolls, and offensive specialists are goblins. So when I'm writing guides or explaining things to people, I usually just use the terms O-specs, D-specs, or elites. Because if I say ogres and somebody's playing a fairy, they're not going to know what that is necessarily. Right? So the main things that you want to focus on: O-specs, D-specs, elites, thieves, wizards, peasants. That's your entire population. Well, all right. So first, we're going to go to the forums, and we're going to talk about military training goals. Now, here is a suggestion guide for you. I had an original one for the beginning of the age, but I updated this one. Notice how I said O units and D units. Now, remember how I talked about offensive specialists and so on and so forth? Just to give you an example, why I say offensive units and defensive units, because every race and personality will have different values for their units. So, for example, an avian, their offensive specialist has 11 attack power, but their elites have 13 attack, right? So both of those would be acceptable offensive units for avian. Now, obviously, avians would prefer to run elites for higher offense as opposed to griffins, right? But let's look at fairy, for example. Their elites, beastmasters, are very strong defensively. So for fairies, if I say offensive unit, basically all you got are magicians for that. But if I say defensive units, well, that could mean defensive specialists or beastmasters, with the preference being elites, beastmasters, because they're stronger. So that should cover that part. But anyway, for your military, it's good to access this guide in the forums that I have here, military training goals. I give you an example for basically the 4 main roles in Utopia. So it's a little weirdly ordered because of the format, but the main role that most people end up playing is the full attacker. I give an example here, or cleric. 9 defensive units, 9 offensive units, 7 defensive units, 2 thieves, 1 wizard, 5 peasants. These numbers, they add up to 25. Every province has a starting population of 25. As you get science and population, or if you include homes in your build, that number will increase throughout the age. So by the end of the age, you may have something closer to like 30 or 35 population instead of 25. But as a starting point, I like to just use 25 because everybody has that, except for fairies because they have a 10% reduction in population, but we'll not talk about that right now. Anyway, so this is an example for a full attacker. Now, when it says 9 offensive units, consider you're playing undead this age. Undead can't train elites, so all they can do is train offensive specialists, right? So don't panic if you can't do something based on your race or personality. Always critically think and be like, okay, this is what it's telling me to do, but this doesn't really make sense for my race, so let me adjust based on my race. But yeah, this is the goal, to be war ready. This is my suggestion to be war ready, is to train these amounts of troops. Now, what do these numbers mean? As you can see here, these values below are listed as per acre. So if you have 1,000 acres, then you want 9,000 offensive units. 7,000 defensive units, 2,000 thieves, 1,000 wizards, and 5,000 peasants. It's all in per acres. Now, do you got to sit there and get a calculator every time and try to be like, okay, so I need exactly 3,179, like, no, just estimate it. Like, if you got 970 acres, just pretend it's 1,000 and go from there. All right. And don't stress out if you can't quite reach those numbers too. Like, oh yeah, I'm supposed to try to have 9,000 offensive units, but I only have 8,800 or whatever. Big whoop. Okay. Work on it as you go. It's just a goal. It's just a guideline, a suggestion. They don't have to be exact. Don't freak out if it's. I'm stressing this because I've definitely had people freak out that it wasn't exact. So it's not that serious. And you can see there it is. You can see here what you actually currently have. So right now, I have only 6.2 defensive specialists per acre and only 6.8 offensive units. Well, 7 if you add the goblins. 7 offensive units per acre. As you can see, that is not the goal for a full attacker, right? I'm short on both of these, right? The other thing, 2 thieves, well, I have 2.5, so I'm high on that one. I'm almost exactly on the wizards, right? But, and this is why I say, like, don't panic about these things, because it's fluid. Every tick, you're drafting new soldiers. Every time you attack, you gain new acres. I recently gained a couple hundred acres. So now I'm drastically underpopulated or under drafted. So I'll go ahead and train right now, for example. Let's see, I'm working on my offense. So since we're not in end of war ceasefire, we're preparing for a war and stuff like that, we don't really want to train elites because they're very expensive. So focus on training just specialists or thieves, right? The time to pump elites is during end of war ceasefire. Now, reminder, if you're playing an orcs can train elites with specialist credits. So if you have credits, absolutely use those to train your elites if you're. But anyway, so this is where you train most of that military. Most of those numbers that I posted up there in that guide, this is where you train the majority of them. These are offensive, defensive, elites, and thieves. Now, what about wizards? Wizards are a unique case. They are trained by how many guilds you have. Every guild produces 0.02, or there's a 0.02 chance of training a wizard per guild, something along those lines. But when it gets to higher numbers, it kind of ends up being what it's suggesting. So in my case, 140 guilds, that's about 2.8 wizards per day, per tick, per hour. So yeah, that's the only way to train wizards. So you can't train them like you can thieves, which is why they're so much harder to pump, right? So if I put a wizard goal up there and you're like, oh my gosh, I am like, this is not, that's okay. Wizards are much harder than everything else to train. Okay, so that's the military, right? One more thing I'm going to show you about military training goals here. I have the roles, right? You're either going to be playing a full attacker, like a player, full thief mage. I give examples here: fairy mystics, halfling rogues, or elf mystics. Those are full thief mage combos. Now, before I continue here, even if you're playing one of those combos, for example, we have an elf mystic, but they don't want to play a full TM. They're wanting to play more of a hybrid AM, right? So even though I'm listing Elf Mystic as an example of a full TM, that doesn't mean you have to play a full TM if you're going with that combo. So, let's say you're playing Elf Mystic, but you kind of want to be able to attack as well. Well, here's where you would look: the hybrid attack mage. I give an example here is Dark Elf Cleric, but if you're playing Elf Mystic or even Fairy Mystic and you want to be able to attack, this is probably where you should be looking instead of this, right? So there's hybrid attack thief, hybrid attack mage, full attacker, full thief mage. That's pretty much your main roles in Utopia. Now, there is such a thing as like a bank, and there are people who like to play hybrid attack thief mage. That's everything, right? If you're interested in things like that, reach out to me and I can explain them a little bit more. But if you're playing a bank, you're probably going to be building more similar to a full thief mage. And if you're playing an attack thief mage, just kind of look at these two and see what the difference is and find a balance in between the two. Basically, that's the short. All right, the second part of this guide is going to be, wow, this is already. The second part of this guide is going to be about builds, or maybe I should make another one. Yeah, let's pick it up.